I think a lot of us don't necessarily talk about openly or freely what is success. Success, as soon as I could touch it, moved again. I think the reason that I really lost my way a lot is because I didn't really have a definition of who I was. Whoa, this is not me. I had to wear a costume of someone else's success for a very long time until I realized that I really have a different definition. If you weren't on social media, how would you know you were successful? Hello, and welcome back to the Ambitious Podcast. I am so excited to have you here. Today, we are doing what was actually something really well received and that you really enjoyed, which was our unfiltered episode. And this basically means that I am coming in with basically no notes. And if I do have any notes, they were created 20 seconds before I pressed record. I am going to be talking freely today about something that I was sitting there thinking about what I wanted to discuss. And I have all these different things that I want to teach you strategically. So we are never going to completely remove that. We're always going to have incredible guests on. We're always going to be teaching you strategy. But there's also this underbelly of what all of us are going for, which is we all want to be successful. We all want to feel like we are scaling and we're achieving and we're, creating all these outcomes that are quote unquote our dreams or vision. But I think a lot of us don't necessarily talk about openly or freely what is success and what does that look like? And what if our success and our definition looks very different than the girl next to us or the girl beside her? And when I started to think about, my vision for our business and our success, it became very apparent to me that I maybe don't have the same success idea as the person next to me. Maybe I don't have the same vision as the next person. And this was something that I learned kind of a hard way in my business, to be honest, because I think for me, my version of success, I felt a lot of shame around. And I wanted to talk about this today because while I am now 7 years into my business, I will say that probably to some of you, based off what I'm going to share today, this might be the first time that technically you consider me successful. And I want to unpack why that is. Because what we're going to dive into today is really understanding what is success? How do you know that you're successful? How do you know that you've achieved? How do you know that you've done the thing? And also, do you actually understand what success means to you? Do you actually understand what it looks like to make progress toward it? And do you have a version of success that's yours? Or is this something that maybe somebody has given to you or that you've adopted? I often say a lot of what we live and breathe and who we are, there's two ways we become that, which is what is caught and what is taught. And I think a lot of our definition of success is caught and taught. And so I want to unpack this a little bit deeper, but I want to first rewind because I think to the sentiment that we do have a lot of our beliefs around success caught and taught. The first place that we ever get that is our upbringing, which is when our parents tell us what it means to be successful. And so I remember growing up, and again, this was not necessarily like my mom would sit me down or my dad would sit me down and say, this is what it means when you're successful. But they're in the little moments, right? They're in the little moments where you try to make a decision off the path of what they saw for you. They're in the little moments where, you have this big idea, but they had a whole other idea for your future. It's in those little conversations. And very slowly, you start to pick up all these little pieces of the puzzle that really become the picture of what your parents told you was the quote unquote right way. And it's different household to household. It's also different culture to culture. But for me, I remember growing up that I was, kind of given this like 5-step plan of success, which is that you go to school, you get a good education, you get like a very standard quote unquote safe job, which was, lawyer, doctor, teacher, anything that basically paid a good income that was also safe in the sense of that it was always going to be needed. We weren't necessarily always, encouraged to go become an artist or go become, a musician or anything that was considered atypical or not. Yeah, I would say these classic 5 careers. And so because we had this big narrative around school, I always determined my success to be how good I can do in school, because if I do well in school, I'll go to university or college. And then from there, I'll get a great paying job And that's great. From there, it then went into, to have a really solid partner and to have a really solid marriage and to make sure that you picked somebody as your life partner who was really stable and solid and somebody that you could really grow a life with, to then hopefully together have children and, basically have this classic, white picket fence, dog in the front yard, kids, husband, career, boom, done. And growing up, you don't question a lot of that, right? Like we always just assume that whatever our parents are telling us is the way. A lot of the time when we're younger, we just adopt that as our version of success. And I think truthfully, until I got into entrepreneurship, I don't even know what I wanted. I didn't have any of my own ideas around success. And so most of what I put my energy into was this idea of money. Like if I had money, all those things could happen. If I had money, I could buy the big house. If I had money, it meant that I probably had that job. If I had money, I would have the nice car. And it's so interesting because a lot of it was very just these check boxes. There was no depth in them. There was no root to them. They were just check boxes. And so then, when I started in entrepreneurship, that really became the moment where my brain started to get broken open to think about what would my life look like if I built it. And I never had that belief until that point. I never believed that I could create this life and draw it for myself. I always had this idea that there was certain things based off of where I was raised or where I lived or what career or education I had. There were only a certain level of opportunities presented to me, and so I kind of had to, leverage those to get the best life that I could. And I think in entrepreneurship, we're all like insanely addicted to personal development. We're never finished. We're never finished. We're constantly open projects. And I think that it's beautiful because obviously it means we're constantly in development. But I think that other thing that it taught me is like this life is something that I can really just draw and almost like, with think about it almost like Play-Doh. Like you can have this in front of you and you can just build and pack it in any way that you want to. And when I got into entrepreneurship, that was like so exciting because I got to define what success was. So just like anybody else who starts an online business, especially, where did I go? I went to the internet. Well, that was the biggest mistake ever because when I started the business, here I am, server Kate, and I really want to have this online business. And so I go online and I start to market, I start to create the Instagram, I start to create the offer. And then you see, Tom and Sally everywhere with their messaging of like hit a 10K month, hit a 10K month. And so I was like, whoa, okay, hit a 10K month, got it. And so I kind of again caught versus taught. I was taught that my first goal was to hit a 10K month. And then I was like, okay, great, I'm going to do that. And then, the next thing became, well, people back then, this is kind of showing how this has been 7 years ago. People back then were buying followers and people were like, oh, it's all about your following. You have to have a big following to be taken seriously. So I thought, okay, great, I got to get this big following because that means I will be successful. And so I'm going for the 10K month. I'm going for the followers. I'm going for even more polished branding. So this is also years ago, your feed aesthetic was everything. And it was something that really, determined people's, I would say, level of respect basically towards your brand back then. It played more of a role than it does now. And so I remember doing photo shoots and trying to like be like, okay, like that is going to help me to look more successful. And so not conscious of it at the time. This was not something that I was aware of. It's something I'm aware of now, but it's not something I was aware of then. I remember just like playing this game and it was like I went for a 10K month, but that wasn't enough because then the internet told me I needed a 20K month. And then that wasn't enough because then I needed a 30K month. And then that wasn't enough. And that was 50. And then it was 70. And then it was, on and on. And it felt like this constant rat race. And it felt like success, as soon as I could touch it, moved again. And it was like this frustrating feeling of like, I just had to keep going. And all the while, I remember, I'm a full open book. So I'm fully able to admit this. I remember when I started my business, when I was talking about aesthetic and the significance of aesthetic for some people, I remember that, I would have these photo shoots and I wanted to create this luxe brand because I didn't feel, if we're going to be really honest and transparent about it, I felt like I had to play a part to be successful. I felt like I had to show up a certain way for people to trust me and for people to take me seriously. And it was really at that moment that I remember there was a time when I went and I bought a used Louis Vuitton bag. And I remember, if you go way back, like we're talking like the first, second year of business, way, way back, I had all of this Louis Vuitton bag in so many of my photos. And it's so sad now because I realize how much of that is, just me begging to be validated or begging to be seen or begging to be, respected, and feeling like if I just have this thing, I would be able to be that thing that people want me to be. But obviously, Louis Vuitton bags are expensive. And so back in the day, I couldn't afford to buy a Louis Vuitton bag when I first started. And even if I could, I don't think that I would, because it's just not something for me personally, like individually to me, that I value. And so I remember I went on Facebook Marketplace and I went and I picked up this Louis Vuitton at someone's house. And I remember feeling so like such a weird feeling because while so much of other people with labels and whatever had deemed this to like be successful, I also the entire time, every time I would carry that bag, I would think I'm such a fraud. I'm such a fraud because I don't even know how to tell if this bag is real. Like, for all I know, it's a knockoff, which it wasn't in the end, but for all I know, it was a knockoff. And I don't know how to tell if it's real. What if someone finds out that I didn't buy it? Like, I didn't even feel like it was mine. It felt like this weird thing that I carried to just look better or feel better about where I was. And it was in all my photo shoots, it was in everything. And I remember my partner at the time, he was so great to me in this moment in time when I was really, again, wanting to show up a certain way. I remember he showed up at my house and he had bought me Louboutins, which are like the red bottom shoes. And again, like these are like $1,200 pairs of shoes that he bought me. And I remember at the time thinking, whoa, because that was just so much money and, you know, was something that I thought again would be like, wow, now that I have these shoes in my photos, people will be like, well, she can afford those kinds of shoes, then she can whatever. And so it was like all these like little moments that would start to come to awareness. And I had so many of those little moments along the way. I remember another moment where I had a photo shoot and it was a photographer I was working with for the first time. And I was a very, again, luxe brand. And with this, I remember they said, I have some outfits that I've pulled for you. And I was like, amazing. And they sent it to me. And I remember one of the blazers was like $3,000. And I was like, um, I've never bought a $3,000 blazer in my life. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. I want to say that there's nothing wrong with that. It was just for me at the time, I was like, this is not like, it was so confronting. I was like, this is not me. Like, this is just not me. And it's not to say it's right or wrong. It's just not me. And I realized at that moment, I was like, what the hell is success to me? Because this is getting so out there. And it was so Instagram and it was so people telling you how much money to make and people telling you how to look and people telling you how to show up and people telling you what it meant to be a polished brand and all these things. And I have so many of these moments in my business where I think I just, especially at the beginning, was trying so hard to be liked, so hard to be successful, so hard to be perceived as successful. And then I hit seven figures. And that was when seemingly you would think, when we're thinking about these income things, every single business that I know is constantly throwing out this label of seven figures, seven figures. And when I hit it, I thought, this is it. This is it. Like, this is the number one thing that I've been working toward. And then I hit seven figures and I realized very quickly, I was like, this doesn't feel the way that I would, want it to feel. And so I remember, seven figures meant that we had done seven figures in revenue. And I just sat there and I thought, I'm here in my like Old Navy pajamas, okay, on the couch in my apartment that I'm renting. And I remember thinking, I have a Louis Vuitton and I have these Louboutin shoes that sit in a box in my closet. And there's that me. And then there's the me here in my Old Navy pajamas on the couch. And I thought, who am I? Because I didn't know. I had this like identity crisis. I'm like, I've hit 7 figures. That's amazing. But this doesn't feel like the way that the internet told me it would feel. I thought I'd be on yachts. I thought I'd be living a very different life, you know? And so I had this whole Instagram BS perception of success. And then there I was. And so I remember in that moment thinking, maybe I'm playing the wrong game. Maybe what I thought success is not what it is. And I think that in order to challenge success and what that means for you, the only way to really do that is to be really confident in who you are and really confident in your vision for your life. And I think the reason that I really lost my way a lot is because I didn't really have a definition of who I was. I was very lost in who I was. Frankly, if I'm going to be honest, until like a year and a half ago. I don't think I really knew who I was until basically a year and a half ago. And it's sad because obviously I'm now 33, and so it took a little long. I was a little bit of a slow learner, but I think that that came through these little invitations, and these little invitations presented themselves, and I got to say, like, what is the game that I'm playing? And initially, it was this game of my parents told me this is successful, so that's who I'm going to be. Then the next game was like internet told me that this is my version of success, so that's who I'm going to be. And then you hit that success, and you have the big 7 figures that they all want to prioritize, and you sit there and you don't feel what you think you're going to feel. And I know that that's maybe easy for me to say, and you might be listening to this and say, well, Kate, if I had 7 figures, I would feel the way I want to feel. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you are putting all of your identity into this number when that number doesn't mean anything to you. Maybe it's not about 7 figures, but it's about putting a pool in the backyard for your kids. Maybe it's not about 7 figures, but it's about, writing a book that can impact hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe it's not about 7 figures, but it's about being able to give a scholarship to somebody twice a year or start a charity, right? Like maybe it's just not about the 7 figures. And I think for me, it took me hitting that number for it to break me open to be like, this is not what I thought it would be. And I need something else to grasp onto because this is not it. And so I have this moment on the couch when I hit 7 figures, and then I remember thinking, okay, well, it's not more money because I'm making money and that's not making me feel better. So let's keep going. And so what I did was I remember saying to my partner at the time, I was like, I want to upgrade our living situation. Like I want to live in a better place. I want to live in a nicer spot. And so we moved into another rental. And with this, it was much nicer than the one that we had been in, which was like, okay, great. Like we felt like we were making it. We felt like we were making progress. And I remember, then it was about, okay, well, we're going to start taking trips, or we're going to, try to travel more, or just like reinvest back into the business. Like there was just always this what's next. And I think at that moment, the what's next for me was the fact that I wanted to live in a nicer spot, and I really wanted to, kind of start my life as this next phase. But again, all the while, I remember I was in this rental and I had, wanted to take on even higher clientele. And I remember being like, I want to redo this whole office and like redesign it basically to make it feel even more luxe for, the experience of where I want to film content. And so much of what I'm describing to you, you're probably going to see is this aspect of image. And I truthfully, if I'm going to be really direct, I got really lost because there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. And this is why I want to talk about it, because I think so many of us go through this and we think, we're alone in it. Like we feel like we're alone in wanting the number. We're alone in feeling like our house is not pretty enough, or I don't have the clothes that those girls wear. I don't go the trips that those girls go on. And I really got sucked into this massive success, not even success comparison, because I didn't care what other people were doing in the sense of what they'd achieved. But I always saw what other people had and I thought, I want that. Like I didn't feel less than. I just thought like, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I have like all these like dopamine spikes of all these ideas of what I wanted. And then it was truly only about a year and a half ago that I realized and really took inventory of, mistakes I made along the way, but also with that lessons that I learned. And what I will tell you is that I think the entire time I have always come from this belief of just success for me was always about people and it was always about impact. And even though I lost my way, there was always that through line that I was focusing on people and impact. And what I meant by that is over the many years, I've done scholarships for clients. Over many years, I have, put team before myself, like in the sense of the fact that I always want to make sure that like they're good in the sense of, financially that they're good, emotionally they're good, like just want to make sure they're always good. And I also really thought about what my money would do for other people. So like if there was a situation where I could help somebody out financially, I was the first to throw down a couple $1,000s to help someone or something around me. And when those moments happen, I didn't realize it until afterwards. But I was like, that's really where I felt the most alive. That was really where I felt the most motivated. That was really where I felt the most like charged around like go, like just go handle this. It's when I could have experiences of the impact of income, not income alone. And I think it was when income was put into something that had no impact, it felt flat for me. So that's why even though I had the shoes and I had the bag and I had like, the office or whatever, and I spent money on all these superficial surface level things, I didn't feel any fulfillment from it because that bag sat in my closet and those shoes sat in a box. And that office, when I closed the door at night, nobody else was impacted by the design of those walls. And it took me a long time to really figure out what success meant for me. And finally, I know what that is. But I think it's something that I want to give you a permission slip that if you are at this point where you're trying to figure out what is success for me, you're trying to figure out what does that mean, I also want to just give you some grace that like it might take you messing up a couple times. It might take you investing in something that you don't actually care about. It might take you, spending on something that you thought would make you feel better, but it doesn't. And I had to go through those experiences as well because I thought it was me, but it's only once I tuned into the true feeling it gave me and the fulfillment it gave me or the lack of that I really started to have some awareness of like, okay, whoa, this is not me. This is not actually what I believe to be successful. And truthfully, when I started to unpack it, I realized I didn't feel confident in my version of success because the internet told me that it wasn't enough. And I've now since then, now I've healed that. I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. I literally could care less. And I'm going to give you some examples. So when someone sees a 7-figure coach, okay, they think, you know, labels, they think fancy car, they think big lavish trips, they think massive monster home, they think, me on a beach in Italy with the Aperol spritz and the notifications coming in. And listen, it's not that I don't want anything to do with that life. I'm fully accepting if the world somehow blesses, me and gives me that opportunity, sure. But it wouldn't be something that I would push for myself. And that's because truthfully, I barely drive. I have no responsibility getting a fancy car. Like I drive currently today the same Acura ILX that I had when I started my business. And like I don't care. Like I don't need to have a Lamborghini for me to be legit, So for me, I realized I was like I would see all these girls on Instagram being like got my dream car, got my dream car. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I was like, my car is perfectly fine. I love my little car, my little Kathy. I love my little car. And she's perfectly fine. Like, why would I get a new car? I don't need a new car right now. So, like, yes, when I have a family and I need to put multiple car seats in the back, I will be getting a new car. But for me in this moment, I just thought, I don't feel the pull to do that. So, why do I feel pressured to do that? I also had this when, people would show crazy labels and like clothing hauls and all these things. And I thought, I am a Zara girl, okay? Like if Zara doesn't promote me soon, I'm gonna be pissed. But like Zara, I live in. I live in like Old Navy and Zara and like these like the Gap. Like I'm just like I love these like OG stores and I'm not that even close to that fancy where I need that and I don't value it. That's the thing. I don't value it for me personally. I have best friends who value that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different bucket in what they value and we respect that about each other. I don't value it. So like they all joke like let me guess it's from Zara and I'm like yeah because like I love for me my thing that I value is I'd love to have lots of options for clothes that cost the same as someone else's 3 outfits and that's because that's just what I prefer. Like it's just what I value. But again, I had an insecurity around that. And it wasn't until I stepped into it. And I remember now going to photo shoots, I said to anybody that I shoot with, I was like, we do not put any of the models, if we have models in our shoots or myself, we do not put any of the models or me in anything other than clothing that a woman who sees those shoes or sees those pants or sees that blazer, I want her to be able to message me and say, Kate, where did she get that? And be able to be like, yep, here's the link and she can go afford it. I am not sending her a $5,000 link for a blazer. Not happening. So it's not, again, to say that that's wrong. It's to more be like, this is what I value and what I value for me and for my brand and for me as an individual. And I really had these moments where I had to start flexing that muscle. It was confronting because you have, again, what we are told is the right thing or we're told is the thing you're supposed to go for versus what you do. And I was so close. I was close to buying the expensive clothes. I was close to upgrading my car for no freaking reason. I was close to these things. And I even truthfully felt insecure for a very long time about renting because it wasn't even about the fact that I couldn't buy a home. It was about the fact that I wanted a specific house, which I'll explain in a second. I wanted a specific house and I kind of was holding out for that. I was kind of holding out that that was going to be the home that I would have. And so, that's really, I would say, the first big purchase outside of my business that I've made. I've made insane amounts of money and investments in my business, but I've never done that in a personal way the same way. So like, I've dropped easy 60, $80,000, $100,000 investments, but I haven't done that in my personal life. And when it came to the house, the reason I had not bought a home until 7 years into my business is because I had a certain home that I wanted. And so recently, one of the things that I value is family. So my mom and my sister both work with me. And one of the things that was really important to me at the beginning of my business was to help them to leave their 9 to 5 because it was like something that, again, I really valued. So I originally had helped my mom leave her 9 to 5. And then after that, it was my sister. And another big goal that I had shared since I was like 16 was that I really wanted to buy the house that I grew up in. And so for me, it was not always for sale. So my mom lived in it. So because of that, she was like, it's not for sale. I'm like, okay. So I waited and I had hoped that this was going to be like my home that I would raise my family in. And so fast forward 7 years after starting my business, this year was the first year that she said, you know what, I think I'm at a place where, she is turning 70 this year and she's ready to downsize and she doesn't want to have this 4-bedroom, detached house anymore. And so that became the moment where I was like, great, like this is the moment. Like this is the moment that I'm going to buy it. And so it was like such a dream for me to be able to like to have the same stairs that I used to run down when I was like 6 or 5 and like try to scurry down to the Christmas tree to see what was underneath it is the same stairs that my kids will be on doing the same thing. Like it's such a wholesome full circle. Like it's the biggest accomplishment that I could ever make in what I value. And even helping my mom and my sister leave their 9 to 5 is such a massive accomplishment for what I value. Being able to take my mom to Paris because she was a single mom of 4 kids is like everything that I would want to do for her. And to be able to help her in any capacity to do whatever she wants in her life is like my ultimate dream. And so the thing that's interesting with that though is like it's still not considered in the scope of the internet enough. And I just realized, I was like, I just don't wanna play this game anymore. Like, I just don't. Like, I just don't care. I don't care to play the game of the labels. I don't care to play the game even of, like, the income thing. Like, there was always and I started this years ago, but, like, there was always this thing around you only hire the business coach who shares their bank accounts, and, like, it's always like, whoever has the most amount of screenshots basically of their bank accounts are the business coach that you're gonna hire. And I just thought, like, I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to play this stupid game. So years ago, we stopped sharing our own business income. Like, it's just, you cannot find it anywhere. Obviously, if someone's my client, they're like, hey, and they ask me, I'm full open book, but I'm not going to share that in marketing because I was like, that's just, I don't want to play this game anymore of like, you tell me what my value is. And that's how it's felt, is it's felt like not even just online, but it feels like in general, we have such this like warped view of what success is. You see the kids who are like renting planes to take pictures as if they're in a private jet. And meanwhile, like they're literally sitting on the tarmac and they're not moving, right? Like, or like it's a staged thing and it's not real. And I see so much of this pressure on, you know, myself as I was growing the business and even on clients who will, feel like they're not enough for the income they're making. They're not enough because they don't have the pristine clean girl aesthetic kitchen, or they feel like they're not enough because their car is supposed to be more bougie because they are at a certain level of business. Meanwhile, they just don't care about that. Like, I feel like I would so deeply love to, like, just get back to the '90s. Back to, like, the moment where we could just live and we didn't have this social media comparison, because that's really what it is. Social media has completely skewed our belief and our understanding of success and what that looks like. And so I started to think, okay, well, like, what do I value? And I value family, my current family, and what I hope to have as a family one day. I value sentimental things. Like this ring that I'm wearing, which I know some people are like, "Are you engaged?" I'm like, "No." Um, what this ring is, and this is again something that really like is more sentimental to me than anything. This ring that I'm wearing on my ring finger is actually something that my mom just got me for my 33rd birthday. This stone is actually the stone that my stepmom was wearing. It's her wedding stone that she was wearing. She had a stroke and she passed away very suddenly. So she went to the hospital with a headache and basically within 24 hours was deemed basically brain dead. And so I remember the nurse at the hospital that day gave me her ring and said, "You hang on to this." And so I obviously was in shock that day, took the ring, and from then, her finger was a lot smaller than mine. And so it never fit me for 10 years. She passed away in 2014, and it never fit me for 10 years. And on my 33rd birthday, my mom surprised me with getting it resized so that it would fit me. And I cried because this ring and the fact that it's from her and the fact that that my mom took time and energy out to do that means more to me than any bag you'd ever buy me. It just it means something. So for me, I just have these moments over and over where I'm like, I just don't care. Like, I just don't care to play this game anymore. And I will say it's so freeing. It's so freeing when you just realize that, like, you're good in your bubble of success and that you don't need validation from the internet to deem you to be successful or to tell you what it means when you're enough. Because I was talking to a client the other day and she said that she was struggling with the vision for her business. So I said, "What's your vision?" And she said, "7 figures." And I was like, here we go. Because every time I hear someone say 7 figures, I always ask why. And she said, "Well, I don't know. I really want to have like, rental properties, etc." And so I said, "Okay, great. I love that. Like now we're getting somewhere. This is really your vision. When you say rental properties, like how much would you want to have extra for your rental properties?" And so she started to unpack the numbers with me, and we very quickly realized she didn't need to have a 7-figure business for the life that she wanted. She could have a $500,000 a year business and be great in the life that she wanted. And so this is why I really felt called to speak to this, because I think so many of us don't even realize we're living in someone else's vision of success until we have this aha moment where we go, "Whoa, like this is not me." And I had to wear a costume of someone else's success for a very long time until I realized that I really have a different definition, which is family. It's sentimental things that are like this house, like this ring that I'm wearing. And it's experiences. It's being able to go on trips with people and to be able to take a week off or to be able to just give someone an experience that they never thought they'd be able to have. Or for me, like it's being able to go to dinners and not be as stressed as I would have been years ago about how much is that, or like can I get this dish, or that dish is off the table because of how expensive it is. Like that to me is real for me. What I see to be I've achieved my level of success. Or, for example, like I'm the kind of person who, those like those they have here it's called like Shoppers Drug Mart, but I think in the States it's called like, well, anyway, what your local drugstore is called. They have these like little point systems and they have these little point cards that you can use. So I'm like, I take those point cards and I always stack up those points and I'll go like use them to buy perfume and whatever. Like I naturally am somebody who just, I would say, likes to live a pretty simple life. And I think there's so much shame around that until we figure out what that means for us. And I think that this is an invitation for you to say, if you weren't on social media, how would you know you were successful? It's the question I asked my clients last week. If you were not consuming social media, how do you know that you were successful? And what was interesting is I had a client answer this. And then later in the conversation, she said, she was telling me, oh, I'm just like loving life right now. We moved to a new property. The kids are, doing this. I'm working less than I ever have. I'm like, amazing, amazing, amazing. And later on, I said, if you couldn't be on social media, how would you define success? And she's like, I want to be home with my kids. I would want to be this. I'd want to be that. And I said, do you realize that you've achieved 9 out of the 10 things you deem to be successful? And there was just like this silence across the call. And you could just see it land with her. Like she's already there. She's already there. Everything she's ever wanted of her version of success, she's already doing. And so everything after that is just abundance. Everything after that was just more. It was just, ample opportunity for more to happen, more money, more freedom, more flexibility. And so I'm often asked, when it comes to my business and my success, why did it like take me so long? And I think, as I said, there was part of this, which is that I didn't really know who I was. So I think because of that, I was kind of trying on a bunch of different I was taste testing a lot of flavors before I realized it's ultimately just chocolate. And so that's what I think was part of my process. But I think the other thing was that I think I always knew because obviously like I had or could have bought a home over the years, but I didn't. I think it's because I always knew that that was just not what I valued. So I think there was part of me that was kind of hanging on for the larger vision of what I wanted. And the other thing that I will say has always been, always, always, always been a huge, huge, huge factor in my business is that I reinvest back into my business aggressively. Like aggressively. Like we're not talking like I spend an extra 3,000 on a coach. Like I'm like website, do it. Like photo shoot, do it. Like podcast setup here, do it. Like I don't spare expense on what I feel will help us to grow the business. And I have peers who are very quick to spend on their personal life. They're very quick to upgrade their car. They're very quick to upgrade their life. But when it comes to investing in things in their business, there's this like hesitancy. Mine's the opposite. I will aggressively invest into my business. And I think truthfully, it's part of why my business has been able to grow the way that it has because my business, and this is person to person, but my business is not my personal bank account. And that's because I recognize that if I want something to grow, I have to put energy into it. I have to put mental, I have to put physical energy into it. I have to put financial energy into it. Like it actually needs resources to grow. So while, yeah, I could have had, oh my God, the things I could have bought over the years, if I had not reinvested back into the business the way that I have or, have done over the years, I could have had a very different, I could have had a Lamborghini. Like I could have done those things. But at the end of the day, number one, I don't value it. And number two, I wouldn't have the business I have today without it, without all the things that I've invested into it. So I think part of me also looks at asking ourselves the critical question, which is your business truly a business, or is your business really just this kind of, big bank account that you like to leverage, or this big bank account that you love to have the ability to tap into? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. We've talked in other episodes about, a business for personal versus a business for growth. And for me, my business is just not a personal business at this current stage. And so I have a great life. I have a very full life. I'm very comfortable. I'm very free financially. Like there's no strain in my current moment in my life. But I also don't need more, because if I had more, I wouldn't even know what to do with it. If I'm gonna be honest with you, I wouldn't even know what to do with it, because it's just not something that at this moment I value. And so I really want to invite you today to look back on what were you taught to be success? What were the things that your parents or your friends or your, surrounding community told you was success? What did other people tell you was the quote unquote right way? And with that, what were maybe things that you tested? What were things that you tried as your version of success? Maybe it was school, maybe it was a certain purchase, maybe it was a certain thing that you went and did that you thought would make you feel great, but it didn't. And having an awareness of what those things are. What are things that you thought would make you successful, or thought would make you feel like you've achieved, but you kind of felt empty afterwards? And with that, if you could define success for you, what is that? Based on nobody else's metrics, based on nobody else's vision, if you could define what success looks like for you and for your life, what does that look like? Does it look like something specific for you as a person, for your family? Does it mean something specific for your health, for a give back, charity, money? Like, what does it look like? And I think it's important for us to constantly check in on this, because I think part of the reason I got lost along the way is that I wasn't checking in on it. I was just more, 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 more. And it was always this constant chase of achievement without ever asking if there was this race was even something I wanted the trophy of. And so that invitation is present for you. And I want to use this as an opportunity to allow you to check in and say, do I feel like maybe I'm building someone else's version of success? And is there a permission slip you need to give to yourself? Do you need to give yourself a permission slip of, a certain level of revenue that you want, and that being okay, that that's enough? Do you need to have a permission slip that, you know what, great, you don't have the crisp white kitchen with the granite countertops? Amazing. Perfect. Like, who cares? Like, what's the permission slip of the thing that you kind of feel like in your life or in your business that you feel insecure about, or you feel embarrassed about, or you feel that you kind of don't really want anyone to know about? That's the thing that I would invite you to start having a relationship with and start owning whatever it is. And I say this as somebody who was that person, who was the person who didn't want anyone to know I had the ugly kitchen and didn't want anybody to know that I have a same old car, right? I think once you own it, there's just such this deep sense of freedom. And truthfully, this goes deeper, because when you go into business and you start marketing online, you start selling online, you start to also just not care about all the noise. You just start to not even care about what so and so's, bag they got. Amazing. Bless your heart. I don't care. Like you start to see someone else's purchase and you go, I'm so excited for her, but this is not for me. You just start to become really protected in your vision and protected in your piece of what fulfills you. And so, whatever that is, I want to give you permission to invite that in, and to also start to make more of a relationship with it, and to allow that to be your home of success versus what other people tell you it should be. And to also say, what are my core like values that I operate my life from? And when was the last time that I checked in on how much those are the center of what I'm trying to do? Right? Because if you have core values, those act as the bumper lanes to keep you in line with the goals that you have and with what it is that you're trying to achieve. So, if you are finding that you're kind of going for achieving certain things or trying to go for certain metrics, and you're like, I just feel like I'm not as fulfilled, there's a possibility that you've actually, lost your values and the core things that you believe in along the way, which is why when you got there, you didn't feel the way that you wanted. And so I hope today's episode was helpful for you. I feel like this was a little bit of a scramble, as it is when it's unfiltered, which is 45 minutes of me with a microphone. So you're either like, this landed, and I feel really seen today, or you go, this was a scramble. What did she say? So I love you either way. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I obviously would love your feedback if you as well are really loving the unfiltered episodes. I know many of you have messaged me in the DMs and said, hey, I listened to your 45-minute rant that was unfiltered and I loved it. So obviously, if there's any feedback that you have, any insights, or even just something you want to share as a takeaway from today, my DMs are always open. I love to hear from you. So please let this be your invitation to reach out. Even if it's not about anything in particular, you just want to share something maybe from today's episode or even just about the show in general that's landing for you. I can't tell you how much that means to me and also to the incredible women behind the show that make this podcast happen. So, with all that being said, thank you so much for listening today, and I will see you on the next episode. And as always, stay ambitious.